Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin. I'm talking quickly because we have lots of stuff to do. I'm with William Bernhardt, I'm going to call Bill, who has written, besides the 60 books that he's written, which includes Ben Kincaid novels and Daniel Pike legal thrillers, which, if we have time, we can talk about that. But we're here to talk about Superman Wars. And it's just what it looks like Superman Wars, about the Superman comic and the things that behind the scenes that we're going to learn about. He's prolific. He's out in Oklahoma. And again, he's written, he's also being a consummate author. He is the founder of WriterCon, which embraces and elevates fellow authors because we need that. And that's huge, and he's gotten authors, I think 30 authors into major publishing houses, which is incredible. Being a fellow author, I know all that. His journey, by the way, Bill, your journey is the stuff they make movies about. I mean,
Ah, I'm ready. Somebody come buy my life rights, and
seriously,
you might not need to add some scandal or something, but I'm
well,
ready.
it's scandal, but I mean, you were a Jeopardy champion, and the
That's
stuff
true.
you do out in Oklahoma, you were Man of the Year. I mean, it's like, I'm looking at my notes. It's like endless. It really is. It really is kind of a life story, and the fact that you give back to authors that way, I try in my own little small way. So that's and you also have the Red Sneaker series for writers, which has inspired a whole bunch of new generation of authors. So
Okay.
and I'm just thrilled that you're here, spending some
Thank you
time with
for
me on
having me.
Saturday. Yep. So why don't you do a little background, and then we're going to move quickly because there's a lot of things to
Gosh.
talk about, a lot of things. So take it away.
Background about me.
Yes.
Um, I'm a writer, as you mentioned, over 60. This one's the 67th published book.
Wow.
But to be fair, I started a long time ago. The biggest advantage I ever had is that I always knew what I wanted to do. I didn't know whether I could do it, but my mom says when I was 7, I was running around saying I wanted to be a writer, and she's my mom, so we got to go with that. And I was writing and sending things off, and I got my first rejection letter when I was 11, which I can prove because I've still got it, and a whole lot more that came after that. But I kept at it, hadn't published anything by the time end of undergraduate was looming, so I went to law school because, you got to eat. But I was still writing and sending things off. And of course, what I never anticipated was how useful that law degree would be, not just practicing law, but when I started to write. I've come back to that over and over again, including in to a lesser degree in this most recent book. Anyway, I kept sending things out. Got my first book published in 1991. Did really well, so I've been going at it ever since and done other things as well. As you mentioned, I've got a series of books on writing. That's the Red Sneaker series. The first one's story structure. And I host this annual writers conference, WriterCon, which is coming up as we record this because it's always Labor Day weekend. So this year that will be September 4th through 7th. And I think it's going to be the biggest and, of course, in my opinion, the best writers conference, certainly in our part of the world. We got over 60 speakers coming, bunch of authors. I think we cover every kind of writing there is. Bunch of agents for people looking for an agent to help them get into traditional publishing, publishers, people who work with authors, and contests and lots of fun stuff too. And as we speak, I'm spending most of my days getting ready for WriterCon, so it's actually kind of nice to take a break and talk to you for a little while.
That's great. That's great. And probably won't be enough time, but we could talk a little bit about Writers Con. You can come back uh, and and
Great.
and talk about Writers Con. We can do anything. I sit in this chair 12 hours a day, and I'm hugely interested in Writers Con because I'm a writer. And
Yeah.
I've done I've done an awful lot in the last 2.5 years with my tortoise book, which I'm looking for. Uh, I might as well hold it up with my tortoise book. I've done so much with that.
Hmm.
But anyway, let's do what we got to do here. Um, so we're going to jump around. I have a whole series of things I want to talk to you about. Why Superman Wars, and
Hmm.
why this story isn't what people would necessarily think, because people believe they already know the Superman backstory. What do you say to that about this?
Well, some people remember, and we'll get to this in chronological order, I hope, but some people will remember the PR campaign waged in 1975 to get Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the creators of Superman, a pension. Well, that was a turning point, to be sure, but it was far from the end of the story. There is 50 more years of conflict after that. So people I hear say, "Oh, I already know that story," and I'm like, "You so don't." What brought me to this story was that I came to realize how important it was as a legal precedent in the creator rights world. That Jerry Siegel, when he sues the comic company in 1947, he becomes the first American writer to sue his publisher, to basically stand up and say, I'm mad and I'm not going to take this anymore, basically. And that's exactly, and that litigation will stretch almost 70 years, but it becomes the most important creator right battle of modern times, and one which has benefited a lot of creative. I wish it had benefited Jerry more, but it has benefited a lot of other people ever since, because he stood up and fought, not always in the best way. But he did it. It's kind of like when I hear people talk about, oh, Jerry did that. I think he created Superman and you didn't, and I didn't, and that alone was a genius move that deserves our respect. So that's what brought me to the story.
Okay, wow. What makes the Superman Wars different from other books about Superman?
Well, in the first place, there really hasn't been one recently uh, that tries to cover the creators and what happened to them. And some of the ones that aren't there have mistakes or omissions, because even though it seems strange when we're talking about a story that begins during the Depression, but in fact, a lot of new information has come to light in the past decade or so. And I've discovered new things that have not been written about before, and I've interviewed people who wouldn't talk before, but will now, because the litigation is finally over and enough time has passed that people on both sides, on both the corporate side and the creator side, were willing to talk now. And I also, I wrote it from what we call the narrative nonfiction standpoint, which is basically just a fancy way of saying that I'm writing from Jerry's viewpoint most of the time. I'm using some of the same narrative techniques that I would in a novel. This does not mean I made things up, because I didn't. No scenes invented for convenience, no dialogue invented or anything like that. But I wanted people to understand not just what happened, but why, and to understand why, you got to understand who Jerry Siegel was. So that's why I told it this way.
Okay, okay, interesting. Um, why does Superman represent what has been called the original sin of comics?
Well, it's not Superman. It's the way Jerry Siegel and his artist pal Joe Shuster were treated. Basically, if you can treat the creators of Superman this way, you can do it to anybody. Just to put this in a quick context, Jerry Siegel is a teenager. He's an 11th grader, basically, when he comes up with the idea for the first version of Superman. And it went through many iterations. But he's, a relatively, poor kid from Glenville neighborhood in Cleveland during the Depression. So it's tough times. Jerry lost his father when he was 17, and the family struggled after that. This is a time when a quarter of the country is unemployed, and there's clearly looming war in Europe, a lot of prejudice going on. Crime is on the rise. The mob, prohibition went away, but the mob did not go with it, unfortunately. So they're tough times. And what Jerry eventually gets to is the character we all know and love who came from another planet and helps us with our problems. In the first story, he calls Superman the champion of the weak and oppressed. And so, despite his kind of science fictional origins, in the early stories, Superman isn't dealing with supervillains and, galactic invaders. He's dealing with the problems of our time. He's basically like a FDR New Deal crusader with a cape and a lot of extra powers to help get the job done.
Okay. By the way, if you see me writing, it's
Hmm.
because I am writing. I take notes. I'm one of the
Gotcha.
few interviewers in American history. Johnny Carson never took notes, and Jimmy Fallon doesn't take notes. I take notes because this is important stuff. Um, so you've written more than 60 books,
Right.
67, if I think I heard you say. Of course, multiple genres. Where did the Superman Wars rank the most emotionally satisfying books that you've written?
Well, it's clearly going to be one of my favorite books ever, not only because of the content and because it is all about writers and there's an underlying message here. Obviously, it's a cautionary tale. Don't let what happened to Jerry Siegel happen to you. We haven't gotten into that yet, but people have probably already twigged onto the fact that he did not become a billionaire despite having $1 billion idea that has made a lot of other people wealthy, but not him. When you mentioned my writers conference, WriterCon, I always do the opening ceremony, and one of the things I always say is make friends, meet people, make contacts. I know you're writers, so you're probably all introverts and you'd rather be at the library, but look, this is your tribe. And writers are the best people on earth. So meet people so you have, a critique group or beta readers or people you can consult when you get this probably AI scam email and you're not sure if it's legit or not.
Oh, yeah.
Make contacts. Don't, and certainly don't sign anything without talking to a lawyer or somebody very experienced in the business first. Don't make Jerry's mistakes. The vultures out there today look a little bit different, but they're still out there. There's still people who would be more than happy to acquire your IP and make all the money from it. So be
Correct.
careful.
Correct. But words, so much wisdom. I get a dozen emails a day. I have a
Yeah,
whole file. They're all scams from
right.
Simon and Schuster, from everything under the sun. We love your
Yeah.
book. This.
Has J.K. Rowling written you? She's written me,
Oh
according to
gosh,
the
no, I
email.
haven't gotten one from her yet, but I did get one from Oprah. You know,
Oh, that might be even better. Well,
I
there you
got one from
go.
Oprah, and I was so excited. And we authors need you at
Yeah.
WritersCon. It's funny what you just said, Bill. Make friends, meet people. 2 days ago, I interviewed a woman named Dr. Elizabeth Freed, and she wrote a book about networking,
Hmm.
and that's what authors need to do.
Right.
Networking is what you just said. Meet people, and as I observed, and I taught networking at Rutgers, part of what I taught 6 years ago, because it's life.
Sure.
Networking is life, and every
Right.
connection you make is like you're a little kid. You earned $1, you went to the bank, you put it in the bank. So every
Right.
connection you make is like a bank deposit.
Yeah. Sometimes writers miss out on that though, because they do tend to be, stay at home with their cat and blanket. I know that's kind of a stereotype, but it's one
Yeah,
that's true, including with
yeah,
me. So I feel like I can toss it out there. People come to the conference and they know they're going to learn stuff. We're going to have more than 60 speakers, more than 100 sessions, evening
wow,
round tables and contests and all that, but they know that up front. What I tell them is what they might not realize that you also need to make this an opportunity to meet people, to build up your support group. We have a free buffet lunch on Friday for exactly that reason. So people will sit there and talk to one another.
correct. That's it's everything. Um, okay, moving on because we have stuff to do. Who is Joanne Siegel? And was she really the inspiration for Lois Lane?
Well, she was the model for Lois Lane. She didn't give Jerry the idea, although he did say afterwards that he kind of ramped up her feistiness because he was inspired by Joanne. Joanne, originally Kovacs, grew up in Cleveland too, and she was a little younger than these two, but not that much. And she had placed an ad. She was in an abusive home and wanted out of Cleveland, so she places an ad thinking to be a model because she kind of thought being an actress might be reaching too far, but I can do that. And Joe Shuster, the artist, saw that when he was starting to work on Superman, and his story was that he needed a model to because he used magazines and other references, but he couldn't find a picture of what a woman looks like when she's been being flown through the air by a guy in a cape. And so I don't know, maybe he just wanted to meet girls, but at any rate, he invites Joanne to come over, and she does indeed become the model for Lois Lane. And if that weren't, and of course, Jerry is the model for Clark Kent. Not so much Superman, but Clark Kent. And then, amazingly enough, 13 years after this modeling session, these two meet up again and end up getting married.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Clark and Lois do, in fact, marry, and they have a daughter named Laura who grows up to be, you want to guess?
Wow.
An
Super.
award-winning reporter. Of
Wow.
course, the child of Clark and Lois is a reporter and a terrific person too. I had the pleasure of talking with her and her two sons, so Jerry's grandsons, and
Wow.
that was a real treat. They have not given many interviews. Uh, and in fact, the first email I got back from Laura started with, "I don't give interviews." I thought, oh, this is off to a good start, but eventually, after we talked a while, she came around and actually was very helpful.
Wow. That's so neat. They got married and had a,
Yeah,
wow. That's so
yeah.
neat.
And she becomes essential because, well, we haven't gotten to this quite yet, too, but Jerry was very creative. He was not the best business person. And by the time they're married, she basically becomes the agent that both Jerry and Joe always needed but never had.
uh, I'm looking at my notes. So Jerry goes to World War II.
Yeah, yeah. But so first point out that to get it's complicated and it's all set. It's not complicated. There's just more to it, but it's in the book. But the bottom line, of course, is that Jerry wanted a newspaper strip. When he couldn't get that after years of being turned down by them, he goes to somebody he knew, Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, at a comic book company who was a writer himself, and he trusted him. The guy never tried to acquire anything except North American first serial rights. But shortly before Superman is to be published, new people take over the company. Harry Donenfeld with his pal Jack Leibowitz, who have mob ties and a very different way of doing business. And Jack sends him the now famous letter agreement, which agrees to give him $130
Hmm.
for people say that he sold Superman for $130. That's not entirely correct. The 130 was for the first 13-page story, and they got $10 a page. So that's where the money comes from. But there's a clause later on that says basically, by the way, when you sign this, you give up all the rights to the strip and the characters to the company. And to his eternal regret, Jerry did sign it. I don't think he really understood what he was doing. He'd never seen anything before, but he didn't have a mentor. He didn't have an agent. He didn't have a lawyer look at it. He should have, but he didn't. And he made a terrible mistake, which he almost immediately regretted because Superman was a huge hit. And they did make some money in the early days, to be sure, good money for Depression years, but nothing like what the company's making. Harry Donenfeld, who didn't even like Superman when he saw it, he's a millionaire on Superman money within a year of the character's debut in April of 38. And as you were saying, Jerry is drafted in 43. He's serving his country for a couple years, more than actually. Joe was 4F because of his already failing eyesight. Jerry comes home and finds everything has changed. The comic company has taken the whole Superman operation in-house, even brought his pal Joe in-house and done all this stuff to kind of, form an alliance with Joe. Worse, uh, before he left, Jerry tried to get the company to get interested in a new character he said he'd created, Superboy. Okay, not totally new, but the idea was Superman and when he's younger and he's kind of a prankster and not everybody knows who he is and whatnot. And Jack Leibowitz rejected it 3 times. Jerry wanted to create a new character that this time he could own. He wouldn't make the mistake again, which is exactly why Jack never said yes to it. Why does he want to publish something he doesn't own? But then while Jerry's overseas and he can't do anything about it, they run the Superboy story anyway. And it's a hit, so they start a whole new series. So
Wow.
Jerry comes home to find they've got not one, but 2 characters he created that they're making a fortune off, and he's not.
Wow.
He tries to work it out with them, but they can't come to terms. And that's why in 1947 he does sue. It doesn't go well for him. He does get some money on Superboy, but he does not get the rights to Superman back. And worse, they fire him from his own character. They
Wow.
fire him despite the fact that they have an employment agreement that has not elapsed. They fire him. And worse, if anything could be worse, they remove Jerry and Joe's names from the credits. Prior to that, every Superman story said Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Not after that, they were erased.
Wow.
Even when the company would reprint stories that had appeared before, they would color over the names. And really, how does that benefit the company? That just seems spiteful and mean to me. I mean, we could argue all night about the legalities. Jerry did sign the piece of paper, but taking an artist's name off their work, that is wrong. That is just morally and ethically indefensible.
Jumping a little bit, has any of that ever been fixed by the powers that be? Uh,
Yeah, it depends on what you mean. I'm not sure the Siegel family would agree that it was fixed, but it's at least been addressed. Jerry and his family went through many decades of tough times. There's this myth out there that Jerry just sat around whining or something. This is not true, and that's detailed in the book too. He hustled like nobody ever hustled before, going from one project to the next. But of course, nothing lands like Superman. And at this point, the companies aren't paying comic book creatives much of anything. Nobody can make a living at that. Everybody's got side hustles because that's the only way they can survive. Finally, as we addressed this before, in 1975, a big PR campaign is launched by Jerry, not by anybody else. Jerry reads in early 75 that they have paid Mario Puzo, that's the guy who wrote The Godfather, $600,000 to write a script for a new big budget Superman movie. And Jerry's like, I'm right here, guys. you know, he's working a civil service job in California at that point, typing other people's stuff, and they're giving this mafia guy, this Godfather guy, I should say, $600,000 to write a script about his character. It makes no sense to him, and he does have a history of writing letters, temperamental letters he shouldn't have sent, and that's in the book too. But at this point, he generates a 9-page, he called it a press release. It's really kind of a long rant, but I mean, that's kind of long for a press release, but it all checks out. When he quotes from letters, it's accurate. And he makes 1,000 copies of this, griping about how they ruined my life, they stole my character, I'm getting nothing from it. And he sends it out trying to get attention. What he gets is crickets. Nothing at first, nothing at all. And finally, the people who first show interest in his story, where does help finally come? It doesn't come from the courts, certainly doesn't come from the corporations. It comes from fans. Because by the 1970s, we have this group of people like maybe your son when he was young, who are comic book collectors and they take it seriously and they want to know more about the artists and writers. and they're generating fanzines, among other things, going to conventions too, but generating these amateur publications, which have actually become very important because they preserved a lot of early comic books history that would have been lost otherwise. Anyway, he gets picked up by the fanzines, and after four or five of those, the Washington Times gets interested, and then other people see that, and pretty soon Jerry and Joe are being invited on television shows. And by Christmas, the company has agreed to give them pensions, annual pensions of, wait for it, $20,000. This is for the I mean, it went further then than now, but as Elliot S. Magan wrote in an article for the Village Voice, the company has solved a major problem by giving the creators of Superman basically what they're paying secretaries right now. Superman is a character that now makes its parent company, Warner Brothers, about $450 million a year on average. Whether there's a movie or not, it's toys and games and underoos and all that kind of stuff. And they gave the creators 20,000. Whatever, at least they weren't going to starve to death. And they did get later cost of living increases. But more importantly, they restored the guy's credits to the strip. So when that movie finally does come out in, I think, 78, their credits are attached. And you know, are they does that make them whole? $20,000? No, but it's something that was important to them. Laura told me a story about she's at the red carpet. They're invited to the red carpet premiere for the first Christopher Reeve movie when it comes out. And so she's sitting there. She's got, you know, Lois Lane on the right and Clark Kent on the left, both parents, and she's holding their hands. And there's a moment you may remember 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the movie. You remember those credits that had the blue, you know, they just swished on the
Yes,
screen. It
yes.
was very exciting at the time. 4 minutes and 16 seconds in, it swishes Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And the audience just cheers because they know what these guys have gone through to get that credit back. And she feels both parents squeeze her hand. And I shouldn't even go to this story because I always get kind of choked up thinking about it. Anyway, she looks over at her dad. Tears are streaming down his face. It meant so much to him. And just to be clear, he wasn't involved in this movie. He got no money from this movie, but he did see his name attached to his character again in a big way for the first time in decades. And to him, that meant everything.
Wow.
But it was not the end of the litigation, unfortunately. Congress would alter the copyright laws. Some people believe in response to the Siegel and Schuster campaign. For that matter, some people think the reason the comic company relented is because they knew Congress was about to change the copyright law. And so they wanted to head that off at the pass. But at
Wow.
any rate, starting in 76, the next year, Congress changes the Copyright Act so that now creators can recover the rights to their work after 50 years. I mean, how many people would live long enough to use that? Jerry
Sure.
and Joe, not many others. But anyway, so you got to jump through all those hoops, but you can get your rights back after enough time has passed.
Wow.
And that, of course, is what leads to what will be the final stretch of litigation, which is not resolved in 2016, you know, barely a decade ago. And you know, it's in the book. I don't want to give everything away, but if I've made this seem really depressing, let me just say that this does lead to a imperfect but much happier resolution.
Nice. Does your background as a lawyer help you in doing all of this?
Oh, so much so. When I started this project, and I'm not criticizing anybody, but I couldn't find a good explanation of basically what took so long. You know, why does it take 70 years to figure out who owns this character? And I couldn't find a very good explanation, and I get it. I think for lay people who haven't, suffered through law school, reading all the pleadings and motions and appeals, now it's sent back to the trial court, and it can be really confusing. But I could sort that out and kind of bottom line it, because I think a book about a bunch of litigation would be really boring. For that matter, even before we get to Jerry Siegel's actions, the bankruptcy action that Harry Donenfeld uses to basically steal the major's company, that's always been mysterious too. But I dug deep into all those bankruptcy files, and I think you'll find the most complete description of what happened and how in my book.
Okay. Oof.
Yeah,
I want to go off topic for 1 second.
sure.
I like this question. I borrowed her from one of my favorite journalists. Uh, um, Here goes.
Okay.
Excluding family or friends, I think I know the answer, but maybe I don't. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Oh, you're thinking I'm going to say Jerry Siegel,
Yeah, sure.
and that would be a good choice. Thinking bigger, I mean, it's going to be a writer. There's so many writers I love and would love to talk to. But would a dinner conversation with Emily Dickinson be interesting? I think she'd be kind of shy and wouldn't know what to do with me. Shakespeare, we don't really speak the same language. I'll go with Jerry. Let's go with that. Jerry, I
Good.
would love to talk to. And I think so much happened after he passed in 96. I think he would be very pleased. I'm sure he is very pleased
He
up
is.
there to see that even though the fight didn't benefit him as much as it should have, it has benefited his family, his daughter, and his grandchildren, and many, many other comics professionals ever since. So I would love, he'd get a big kick out of this story. So I would lead with this.
Okay.
You probably know who Jack Kirby is, major comics figure, especially in the 60s when Marvel starts to take off. But in 51, he's working for a lot of different people, including DC. Jerry is sending lots of letters trying to get attention to his plight. And Jack sends, with Joe Simon, his partner, sends a letter to DC saying, well, I just wanted you to know that we don't approve of all this stuff Jerry Siegel is doing. Jerry thought the creative community would rise up and support him. Well, wrong. This is basically a sucking up to the boss letter. Flash forward many decades later. Who's suing now? Well, it's the Jack Kirby estate, alleging the exact same
Wow.
claims the Siegel
Wow.
family pioneered and proved could be effective. They even hire the same lawyers
Mm.
as the Siegel family to handle the case. So, they didn't support him at all when Jerry was doing it, but boy, have other people benefited since.
Wow. Wow. This is
And one
so
of the first things I mention in 75, the guys get their pension. Early in 76, the comic company finds a new president. They were apparently very dissatisfied with what everything that happened in 75 and the bad PR. And they bring in Jeanette Kahn, so for the first time, the company has an actual experienced professional, somebody with a business education and experience. Somebody I interviewed told me that this is when we stopped keeping sales figures on paper bags. We're like a real company.
wow. Wow.
And of course, this is the reason why I keep saying the comic company instead of DC Comics. That wasn't actually the name until Jeanette Kahn made it the name in 76. And one of the first things she, with Paul Levitz, who will later become the president as well, they focus on is creative rights because they don't want a repeat of what happened with Jerry and Joe. Plus, they realize that uh, people reading comic books today are not all 8-year-olds. In fact, the majority is college students and older, which is something Marvel figured out first and started playing to that. If they were going to steal that audience, they needed better writers and artists. And they weren't going to get that unless they started paying people a living wage or started giving creators of characters bonuses when their characters used in other media. And by 1980, they have a much better contract. Now, is it perfect? Of course not. There's still a lot of room for improvement, but at least they saw the problem and started working in that direction. And that too would never have happened but for Jerry Siegel standing up and fighting.
Wow. Which is a good segue um, to this question. Uh, the talk about the slogan, truth, justice,
Yeah.
the American way. Where did that come from?
Well, that originally came from the Superman radio show and then was adopted by the first television series. Everybody, I think, remembers George Reeves standing there in front of the American flag. And this is in the early 50s, the Cold War. And it's really a Cold War slogan, truth, justice, and the
Uh-huh.
American way. You know, to me, people ask, would you continue that? And my answer is always no, because I think Superman loves everybody, not just Americans. But more to the point, to me, it seems redundant. Truth and justice is the American way, isn't it? At least it is to me. So that's where that comes from. But and I can't take credit for this, but I thought the publishing company, the subtitle, "The Battle for Truth, Justice, and an American Icon." I thought that was clever. I
Yeah.
wanted it to be the never-ending battle for, and they said, "No, don't put that on the cover. People will think the book never ends." And so we lost never ending.
It's a great cover. This is a
Yeah, I
great
thought they did a
story.
great job too. About as much Superman as you could show without, violating anybody's
Yeah,
trademark.
yeah.
So it's perfect.
It's funny. I grew up in the 50s watching Superman on
Yeah.
TV. And after every episode, we'd run out and I was, 11 years old, who's going to be Superman today and blah, blah. I
Yeah.
mean, it was such a part, of
Yeah.
it was such a part of our culture. Um, I just want to, I want to circle back because by the way, we could talk for hours, and of course, we're running out
Mhm.
of time. We could talk for
Mhm.
hours and that's why you should come back because there's so much more to you. But you've been called Oklahoma's Renaissance man because you're a teacher, you're a publisher, you do podcasts, conferences, retreats. Even you were a big winner in Jeopardy. What actively still excites William Bernhardt the most when you wake up in the morning?
Hmm. Well, I still write every day. And as I think I already mentioned, I'm heavily into prep for our writers conference, WriterCon, because it's only, what, 3 weeks away or something at this point in time. It's close. Um, Beyond that, I have hobbies like everybody else. You may not know it, but you're talking to me in the piano room. I'll wish I didn't do this, but I
Wow,
play the piano,
wow,
and what I think actually got, and I wrote a musical. What I think got that Renaissance man thing was when they found out that I had done crossword puzzles for the New York Times, which of course I framed. Can you see those? I'm probably
sure.
making you seasick now.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I've also taken up painting of late, but those I don't have anything where I can show you. But one of the T-shirts at WriterCon this year is based on one of my paintings. You can do anything when it's your conference, so
Correct. Correct. It's funny you talk about painting.
Mhm.
On the back cover of my novel, I drew this. Um,
Oh, that's terrific.
I'll send you a copy of that. I drew that in 1970 because I was worried about this thing called Vietnam, and I
Mm.
was a fighter for civil rights. I still am, and so one day I drew that. The emotion just came out of me in 1970, and then when I was looking for a back cover for my novel, "There's a Tortoise in My Hair," I said, "Gee, that represents me," and
Hmm.
it's kind of my story.
Oh, I'm so
Um,
jealous. Now I need to get one of my paintings on a book.
do
I
it.
probably have to write about cats though, because I seem to keep drawing cats over and over again.
Then do it. Just do
It's
it.
because they're all over.
That's funny. That's funny. Just do it. It's funny in my novel. Tortoise, I have my character going to Florida just to find the dock where Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall stood in the movie Key Largo, because I'm an
Hmm.
old movie person. and while my character's in Florida and he's at this resort, it's the middle of the summer, there's nobody there. Some woman sits next to him, and of course it starts something. And where's she from? Oklahoma.
Yeah,
Where that came from, I know
who
not.
knew?
I've never been to Oklahoma, although I was a big fan of the University of Oklahoma football long
Yeah,
time ago,
yeah.
60s, 70s. Um, as we're kind of winding down. So my podcast is about human journey.
Hmm.
When someone spends 50 years writing and teaching and mentoring and stuff like you've done and helping other writers, which is what WriterCon is all about, what have you learned about human nature that surprises you? And compared with the young William Bernhardt, who dreamed of becoming author, where are you now?
Hmm. What have I learned along the way about human nature? Well, here's one thing that comes to mind at any rate. In the comic book world, your typical story has the good guy or guys and the bad guy. In real life, bad guys aren't usually wearing flamboyant costumes and cackling about how evil they are. That doesn't mean they don't exist, but nobody thinks they're the bad guy of their own story, right? Some of the people who have done some of the most horrible things we could come up with thought they were the hero of the story. Even in this story we've been talking about, the Superman story with Jerry Siegel, there's a point in there that's based on something Jerry wrote. He left behind an autobiographical fragment that I was able to find and use, but he's talking to the guys who've taken over the company, the guys who are making his life a misery, Harry Donenfeld and Jack Leibowitz, and sitting in their office getting nothing that he wanted because basically Jack's saying, "No, why should I? Why should I do anything for you? I've got Superman, you don't." And Jerry realizes it's not that these are bad people, they're business people. And that's really the heart of the conflict, and not just this one. It's art versus commerce over and over again, and commerce usually seems to win, unfortunately. Anyway, it's not that they're necessarily hardcore. I mean, they were working with the mob, but still, people did. And in fact, I won't spoil it, but in the book, you'll find out that Harry Donenfeld had another side, not nearly so well popularized. And to me, that makes him even more interesting to me because you think, how could somebody who is so nasty in his professional life be generous in other venues?
Hmm,
But that's that's human character. We are none of us none one note. We're all a lot more complicated than we look.
correct, correct. Last question. 'Cause, I mean, there's a million more, but last question. If Jerry Siegel could sit beside you today and you could see millions of people wearing T-shirts and watching
Mhm.
Superman movies and introducing Superman to their children, I watched my son introduce Superman to his two little kids
Yeah.
because he grew up with that. And what do you think he would honestly say about all of this today?
I'm not sure what he would say about some of the stuff that goes on in comic books today. But I think I said this before. He would be very pleased to see that his family is okay now as a result of, Laura alone was involved in the litigation for 20 years after both her parents had passed. She carried the torch, and I think that would make him happy. It really tore him up. I mentioned that Jerry wrote a lot of out there letters in 51 that he really probably should not have. Is it a coincidence that Laura was born in 51? I don't think so. I think I've got daughters too, and I get it. You want to do anything you can for them, but you can't always. And Jerry was in no position to spend much money, and I think it really tore him apart. I think that's what instigated the letters. I think he basically had a nervous breakdown, is what we'd call it today. And he talks in that autobiographical fragment I mentioned about feeling suicidal at times. I think Joanne is the reason, he was around for several more decades. I think she kept him calm and she took over the business aspect so that he could just focus on being creative, which he was very good at. Um, but anyway, I think it really hurt him that he couldn't do more for Laura when she was young. So he would be very pleased to know that now she's doing all right and then
Good.
some.
Good. Well, thank you for this.
You bet. Thank you. Hey, like you were saying, let's do it. Do you know what my next book's going to be? Did they
No,
tell you that?
no.
Next year, it's the Batman Wars.
Oh, wow.
And let me tell you, that story is, well,
Wow.
it is less well known than the creator conflict behind Superman. And if anything, even more tragic and heartbreaking. So, well, that's not very enticing, but it works out. So, so we can come back and talk next year about
Absolutely.
Batman.
Absolutely. Listen, I would love you to come back. Hey, listen, we're authors. You do. I mean, you do really. I do a little bit of give back because I interview authors. I give them a platform and
Hmm.
promote. And I've got, but I mean, you
Yeah.
quintessential, the
Well,
caring
that's what
nurturing.
WriterCon is for. I am very well aware how fortunate I've been. I get to do exactly what I said I wanted to do when I was 7. How many people get that? And I've been able to keep it going for about 35 years now. So this is just my way of giving back a little
It's
bit,
a
or
wonderful way to give back from
yeah.
somebody who lives this every day. Being an author, I live it every day. I actually went to AI. I went to AI, my friend,
Mm.
and said to AI, do a deep dive into me. 67 pages
Wow.
about, yeah, 67 pages about my author's journey these last 2.5 years. And an analysis because winning 13 national awards in the cricket store, I should be here, but I'm not. And, and
Mm.
and I've already written my thing for Jimmy Fallon when I'm on his show because one day I'll be on a show, and he's going to ask me words of advice for the 2.7 million self-published authors every year. And I said, Jimmy, I think about this all the time. I've refined my words of advice. I've always dreamed of being on your show. I'm reenacting this thing now. I've always dreamed of being on your show. I'm so happy, and I have tremendous words of advice for the 2.7 million uh, 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 self-published authors. Here's the one word of advice:
Hmm.
don't. Funny stuff.
uh,
So,
yeah.
uh,
Don't expect it to happen overnight.
no,
At any rate, is what
it's
I
a
tell
journey.
people. You got to be in for the long haul.
It's a long haul. It's a journey, and it's a love.
Yeah.
It's a love of what we do. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Bill, so much. Good luck with
Thank you.
WritersCon. I'm going to just stop recording. We'll do a 30-second wrap. Thank you so much for this. Truly, this was
Thanks for
great.
having me. It's been a
Yes, this was
pleasure.
great. Thank you.